welcome to another 80s golden age of comedy. I am just having the best time with this show, reminiscing with guys that I represented. I was a personal appearance agent for stand up comedians in the 80s. Probably worked with, I remember one time figuring out about 35 guys, and it was really extraordinary. It was an honor. And I had a chance to work with people who are, have household names now. So it was a great, great experience. And today is going to be a bit of a different show for me because all the other shows I've done, 15, 16 shows, whatever that number was, were with guys that I knew and guys that I work with. And Steve is someone I didn't get to know that well, and we didn't work together that I could remember. So I want to welcome, and I'm going to learn all about Steve Bluestein along with you. So welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks. Great. It's great to be here.
It's really nice having you. I don't know anything about you other than I know you're an accomplished guy. You did some great things starting in the 80s. Tell me, where are you from? Tell me your story so that we could learn more about you.
Originally from Boston. And after college, I moved to New York City, and I was an assistant buyer in budget ladies' handbags. And I hated it. I hated it, but I was very funny in the office. So I went out to California on vacation, and I fell in love with the place. It felt like I had always lived here. So I went back to New York. I sold my apartment. I quit my job, and I moved across country to Los Angeles. I got here on a Wednesday. I got an apartment on a Thursday. I got a job at the May Company on a Friday.
Wow.
And so it was like the gods were telling me this is where I should be.
Absolutely. What year was that?
Oh, 1847. It was about 1970, I think.
Oh, wow. Really? Wow.
1970. So I hated the job at the May Company as much as I hated the job in LA. But I was living in an apartment building with the swimming pool, and they were all the apartments looked into the pool. And I would be by the pool, and I'd be making everybody laugh. And that, because that's just my personality, I make people laugh. And one of the tenants in the building was Dave Madden, who was Reuben on the Partridge Family.
Wow.
And he said to me, you're really funny. You could do this. And there's this place that just opened up. It's called the Comedy Store. Sammy Shore just opened it up. You should go down there. And sitting next to me on the other side was Albert Hammond. Now, Albert presently is a famous songwriter. He wrote, he's in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He has an Emmy for his scores, but he would just come to Los Angeles. And he said, yeah, he's right. You could do this for a living. And Albert Hammond and Dave Madden took me to the Comedy Store for the first time.
Wow.
And I walked in and I sat in the audience and I said, I could do that. And I had material that I'd been doing in college, So I put it all together and I went back on an open mic night. And I did 5 minutes. I got big laughs. And Sammy Shore came up to me that night and said, keep coming back.
Wow.
You have the sound. You have the sound.
Wow.
And I tell everyone, if Sammy hadn't said that, I would have gone back to my apartment. And the next morning, I would have gone to the May Company, and that would have been it. But because Sammy gave me that much encouragement, wow, I kept coming back. And I became one of the regulars at the Comedy Store when the Comedy Store first opened, when Mitzi Shore was sitting in the ticket booth taking tickets, when everybody would just come and hang out. Barry Levinson, Craig T. Nelson, Flip Wilson. They all hung out there, and then it started to wane, because in LA things become popular, and then the people move on to the next thing. And Mitzi and Sammy were getting a divorce, and Mitzi wanted the club, and she called me and she said, "We're having a meeting with the attorneys. Will you come with me and be?" So I was at the meeting where Sammy Shore gave Mitzi the Comedy Store. And
Wow.
when Mitzi took it over,
Whew.
she organized it, she merchandised it, and that woman created what is the comedy club business today. The light on the picture, the comedy condo, all those things were Mitzi's ideas. So, anyways, so I was like deeply entrenched in the
Right
comedy.
there. You were
I,
right there. Wow.
strangely enough, right? It was at the Improv where Gary Weinberg, which was an agent at ICM, came up to me and said, "I saw you at the Comedy Store 2 weeks ago. It was the first time I had laughed in a month." And he said, "Would you come up to the office?" The next day, I was at ICM and I was signed to ICM. And that's how I got started.
So, so take me to that next step. I know that all the guys and gals, they all knew that they needed that extra something to give them the respect that they needed to get those times from Bud. So, what were the days like after that happened for you?
Well, after it happened, I was on the road. I mean, I was literally working at the Improv in Las Vegas and got a phone call and said, "You're opening for Kenny Loggins tomorrow night in Lake Tahoe." And it was like, it was that easy. And the next night I was in Lake Tahoe. And from that point on, I was an opening act. Kenny Loggins, uh, Frankie Valli, Frankie Avalon, Seals and Croft, Donna Summer, Barry Manilow, Melissa Manchester. Um, I just worked continuously until the economic crisis, when they stopped using opening acts and they started using co-headliners. So Joan Rivers would work with Johnny Carson, or the Smothers Brothers would work with Joan Rivers. And it just cut out the opening acts in Vegas. So I had to go to the comedy clubs and work the comedy clubs as a headliner for maybe 10 years. And I hated every minute of it.
Ah,
Because I had entered at a higher level, and now I was working. This was a professional level, and now I was working at these comedy clubs. And there were very few comedy clubs that treated you with the respect that, I used to say, you think we're less important than the beer, and there was only one or two clubs, the Ice House in Pasadena, where you got treated, where he had a green room for the comics, and the Indianapolis Comedy Connection with Chick and Patty Parent. They treated, and because of that, those two people are still friends of mine to this day, But the rest of them, most of them, treated you with very little respect. The audiences didn't know it.
yeah, it left a bad taste in the stand-up's mouth and mind, and it's too bad because that's how they become better and more professional. And it's sad to hear. You're certainly not the first person that said that it was rough being on the road.
Well, yeah, and then when the comedy boom crashed,
Which was
club,
when?
uh, maybe like in the early '90s, I think, or mid '90s, clubs that were paying you $3,000 or $4,000 plus airfare. We're now paying you $1,000 with no airfare. And
Wow.
I remember saying to the owner of the Houston Comedy Club, I said, I didn't like doing this at $3,000. I'm certainly not coming back for $1,000.
Wow.
So that's when I transitioned from being on the road to being a writer, which was much easier for me. I didn't have to travel. I was my own boss, and I worked on several TV shows.
So I certainly want to hear all about that. But let's go back to the actual the grind, working the Improv, the Comedy Store. Tell me a little bit more about that. Who you kind of came up with? You know, we're not friends with everybody, although everybody knows you. You know everybody, and you had some guys that you were very very friendly with, and some uh, there was no connection. What was? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I remember David Brenner telling me, he said he didn't understand the LA scene because it was so competitive. He said in New York, everybody helps each other. They hear about a job, and in LA, it was really competitive. Uh, and there was one guy, I don't want to name him. He wasn't really a comic. He was a comic actor, and he was very prevalent at the Comedy Store. He set the tone. He really set the tone. There were stories about he was roommates with someone, and that person got a call from his agent, and the other guy never told him and went out on the interview. It was
Oh,
stuff like that.
wow.
And but I still have friends to this day from that time period. I came up with George Miller, uh, Kip Adada, um, Jeff Altman, Steve Altman, Elaine Boozler, um, Tom Dreesen. Um, it's so hard for me.
When I was there in the 80's, Jeff Altman's name, he was all over. He was getting roles on television, and everybody talked about Jeff. He was like a little bit of a living legend. What are your memories of him, and do you hear anything about him?
Yeah, well, Jeff was different. He was certifiable, and he used to take girls to the back of the club and hypnotize them. I remember, and but Jeff is. I mean, I have nothing but fond memories of Jeff. He was a good guy. I mean, there is one guy that we worked together 38 years ago, and I still hate him to this day. And I won't even mention his name, but anyone who knows me knows who I'm talking about. I also worked at that time with Franklin Ajayi, who was and we saw the first of everything. We saw at that time we saw the first lesbian comedian, Robin Tyler, get up. We saw the first uh, black ventriloquist. Um,
Willie,
what?
Willie Tyler.
Willie Tyler. Um, we saw the first of everything. I, I was there the night that Gallagher got on stage for the first time. And he came on with this big trunk and all the other comics in it, because we were um, such a tight knit clique, and very judgmental. He comes on with this trunk and he does his set, and at the end of the set, he pushes the button and the trunk opens, and suddenly it becomes this big, circus tent, moving parts and stuff. And we went, "Oh, this guy's good," And then Shirley Hemphill came, and I this is a great story about Shirley. Shirley came She wore cutoff jeans and a sailor hat pulled down. She was very poor. She used to walk to the club. I remember stopping on Sunset Boulevard, picking up Shirley because I saw her walking and driving her to the club. I also remember standing out in front of the Comedy Store and seeing a circle of comics and Shirley walking up to them and the circle sort of closing up, you know, to keep her out of the circle. It was really quite obvious to me. And then Shirley got What's Happening. And I was there the night. She pulled up in front of the club in a Rolls Royce, in her Rolls Royce, and she parked it right in front of the front doors of the Comedy Store. And she threw the keys to the
Valet.
yeah, the valet, and said, "Leave it there." I mean, yeah, I mean, it was, I laughed, I howled because, you know, she got her comeuppance. I was really sad and upset when she passed away. She was really quite wonderful, off stage and on stage. You know.
That's a great story. No one outside your immediate circle would know something like that.
Yeah,
That's a nice memory. I like that.
yeah. Those are great times. You know, Pat Proft, who was a regular at the Comedy Store and the Comedy Store Players, he, when we're still friends to this day, Pat went on to write Police Academy, Airplane, all those Zucker films. When we were there at the Comedy Store, we kept saying to each other, we should be writing this down. You know, we should, this is history. But we didn't think of it as history. We didn't think of it. And that's the new Comedy Store documentary on home box office. I couldn't watch it. I couldn't watch it because we had a different story. You know, they were own, and I totally understand, and I don't fault them because they have to create a product for an audience, and the audience only knows the names, you know, the big names. So what came before wasn't as interesting, but it still hurt, and I didn't want to watch it because there was a whole generation of people who started the Comedy Store in terms of creating a following at the Comedy Store, and they weren't what's the word I'm looking?
Included.
Yeah, included. Yeah, yeah.
So my little story, kind of like that, is over at the Improv. I used to be pretty friends with Robert Townsend. We hung out. He was there quite a bit, and then I didn't see him again for months. And I said, "Robert, where you been? What's going on?" He says, "I'm making a movie." I said, "Sure you are," because that just didn't happen. And he went against the grain and made Hollywood Shuffle. Turned
Yeah.
out to be very successful.
Well, I mean, you know, the Comedy Store at the beginning was so influential in creating the comedy industry and the offshoots of the comedy industry. Case in point, Gary Austin was one of the 4 Comedy Store Players. Gary started a workshop, an improv workshop, which I was a member of. And that workshop became the Groundlings.
Oh.
And I was in the very first show the Groundlings did.
Wow.
It wasn't called the Groundlings. And it was me and Valerie Curtin and Archie Hahn.
Oh, I know Archie.
Oh yeah, Archie's a great guy. And Jack Sue and Randy Kirby and Cindy Williams and Candy Clark. I mean, it was, and nobody had done anything at this point, but it was a training ground. And I always used to say it was more fun for me breaking into show business than it was being in show business. Because when you were breaking into show business, every night was that excitement. Maybe I'll be discovered tonight, you know? Once you got discovered, you were just thrown into a big pile. When I was at ICM, I had an agent who absolutely believed in me and tried to got me. I mean, I had casting people say to me, boy, does your agent love you? And because he would fight to get me in. But there were 30 agents up there, and he couldn't get any of the other agents excited about me the way he was excited. So it was more fun trying to break in than it was to be in, because then it just became a job, you know, opening. When I got signed, Sandy Gallen signed me as he was my manager, and the very first thing they got me was a gig in Las Vegas at Caesar's Palace with 100% billing with Phyllis Diller, Pat Cooper, and myself.
Wow.
It was, you know, and because of that, if you go to Vegas today and you go to Caesar's Palace and you see the billboard that flashes the names of headliners at Caesar's Palace, you'll see my name come up.
Wow.
So, and I got there and they had literally emptied a broom closet to give me a dressing room because they only had 2 dressing rooms. One went to Pat and one went to Phyllis. And my agent came and said, I'm going to speak to somebody. And I went, no, not yet. I don't care. You know, they've earned it. I don't need it. I can get dressed in my room and I'll come down and do the show. But it's the kind of stuff that goes on all the time. When I opened for Barry Manilow, he took my dressing room for his band and gave me the toilet in the dressing room to change it. You know, but that you're an opening act. You know, there's some comic out there that said, I don't know who it is, but it's a great analogy. He said that the main act, if you think of it as a meal, and the main act, the headliner, is your main course. And on the side, you always get a pickle. You didn't ask for the pickle, but they throw the pickle. They throw the pickle in. I'm your pickle. And it's exactly right. You know, it's exactly right. I opened for Kenny Loggins, who was really terrific. His music was amazing. And I used to do my show and then run and sit in the audience because I loved his music so much. And during the week, they kept saying, Sunday night is the employee show. Sunday night is the employee show. It's going to be so much fun. And I had heard from Liz Torres, because she opened for Liza Minnelli, I had heard that it's really hip and happening and the Sunday, because, you know, it's not the people from Iowa, but it's the Sunday night. I'm all ready to get, you know, to go. And I hear, ladies and gentlemen, Sahara is proud to present Kenny Loggins with a comedy of boo. Didn't even get my name out. Didn't even get my name out. And I came out on stage to a prison riot. They were talking, they were throwing shit up on the stage. And at one point I looked over and there's a girl had crawled up on the apron and she was on her hands and knees crawling on the stage, and she tapped me on my legs and said, move over, so she could get back, you know. And it was and I said, okay, that's 19 minutes. Thank you. Good night. And I got off stage, and the stage manager said to me, congratulations, you just did 7 minutes. I said, well, it felt like 19.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Kenny was in his dressing room going, he's what?
How did that feel? You know, a lot of the guys have walked me through their first Carson Tonight Show. And it was really fascinating to hear their first show and what it was like behind the curtain. And they really walked me. Dreesen was fantastic, telling me about his first Carson. It was, and Will Schreiner, I just worked with Will the other day, and he walked me through it. What was it like being backstage? Because I can never do it in a million years. That's just not something I can do.
Let me tell you one story. First of all, I get incredible stage fright. Incredible. My heart starts pounding so badly that I get pains in my shoulder. Once I'm through the curtain, I'm fine. But that anticipation for going on. So I had just gotten divorced, and because I found out that I wasn't the father of the child that was produced in the wedding, in the marriage.
Ooh.
Up until that point, I had always carried a picture of that baby, and just before I went on stage, I would kiss the picture for good luck. I was doing the Mike Douglas show, and I was waiting backstage, really heart pounding. Talent coordinator says to me, all right, here we go. Aren't you going to kiss your baby's picture? Just as the curtain opened. And it was like someone had hit me in the face with a shovel. And you can see the videotape of me, like someone who didn't know where they were, fighting back tears and having to do stand-up. That's what it was like. But that was only one time. But most of the time, it was the anticipation is just, for me personally, it's just awful.
And walking out in front of 2,000 people or 3,000 people, I know what was that like? I mean, I know you really needed to get that first joke out and first laugh.
Right. Listen, I opened in front of 10,000 people. I opened for Matt Davis at the Kansas State Fair.
Wow.
And Minnie Pearl we had done a TV show together, and I said to her, I'm going to open for Matt Davis at the Kansas City Fair. And she said to me, here's your opening joke. She gave me an opening joke and got a huge laugh, and that got me going. And I had learned from acting class, when you're this big on stage, you have to be that big for them to see you. So I was really big, and I slowed my tempo down because the joke has to go out and then the laugh has to come back.
Right.
Slowed down. I'm really fast paced in a club. Bum, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. I don't like any silence, and it was wonderful. I mean, for me personally, there's nothing more exciting than working in front of a live audience. I love that. I did not like television because there was a camera between me and the audience, and I wasn't good at doing that. I was always 10 times better in a club than I was on television.
What about evening at the Improv for you?
That was okay because the cameras were in the back of the room, and I had worked that room so many times that it was like being at home, and always hearing Bud in the background laughing was always reassuring,
And all the other comedians in there, you can tell other comedians' laughs. I know that.
Yeah, I mean, another comedian, they don't laugh. They either go, "That's funny," or, ah, so you're telling you the comic on stage. The worst audience in the world is a room full of comedians because they don't laugh. You know,
That's
the best,
funny. That's funny.
the best, the best audience is in the Midwest. The most Ohio, Iowa, Illinois, just the best audiences. Even Texas at some point, in Oklahoma. I was really surprised. And for me, the worst audiences were in New York because they're so judgmental. You know, yeah, in the upper, New England.
How about that showcase out in LA when showcase night?
I never did it.
No?
No, I never did. I was all before that. I wasn't. I didn't have to showcase because I had already gotten an agent and was working already. Yeah.
So who are your buds?
Who are my buds?
Yeah, who are the guys that you consider your good friends from that?
Well, Pat Proft, Gary Austin, uh, the late Gary Austin, he passed away. George Miller, also dead. Jeff Altman, Charlie Hill, also dead. Everybody's dead. Elaine Boozler. Who else? I'm really bad if you make me draw a name on demand. I'm really bad at that. If I had written them down before, I could have told you.
So tell me about your relationship with Bud and with Mitzi and how different it was.
Well, it was totally different because with Mitzi and I started together. Like I said, she asked me to go to the meeting where she got the club. So and she gave my wife a job at the club as a waitress because she knew we needed the extra income. Bud had already been established. There was always this: who came first, the Comedy Store or the Improv? Well, the Improv absolutely came first. I went to the Improv in 1969.
Wow.
And saw comics there. But the Improv in New York was where the theater kids came after their show. And so there was singing and there was magic and there was comedy and there was all kinds of stuff. Whereas the Comedy Store was the first club that was specifically for comics. So it's a 6 of one, half a dozen. Yes, Bud absolutely came first. And yes, comics came out of the Improv in New York. But the Comedy Store was the first one to do specifically just comedy. And Bud, I never got close. I mean, I'm close to Bud, but I wasn't, close because I was considered a Comedy Store comic. And, Bud had his loyalty to those guys who only worked the Improv.
Right.
And I understood it. It's a business. Everybody's out for themselves.
So tell me about the challenge of trying to get a sitcom or trying to get a movie.
Well, here's the interesting thing. I always assumed that that's where I would end up in a sitcom. And I kept going out, and I never got cast in anything. And there's a wonderful story. I went up for a movie and I walked in, the casting woman was looking up. I walked in and she looked up and I said, "What?" She said, You're Stanley." I said, "No, I'm Steve." She said, No, the character. You're Stanley. Look. And so she said, "Please, I hope you can read. I hope you can read." She gave me the description. It's it. That's perfect. You've got, she just come with me. She takes me into the producer's office. He's sitting on a couch. His leg is in a cast. And he says, he looks up and he says, "Oh my God, the guy's stand." She said, "That's what I told him." So I read, they love me. "Who's your agent?" "I see him." "Okay, thank you." So I go back to the agency and I say, "I got it. I got it." They said, "Great, I'll let you know." 1 week goes by, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by, I don't hear. And I said to my agent, "Whatever happened to that movie?" They said, "Oh yeah, they went with a black woman." That's, I swear to God to you, on my father's grave, that's the truth. So, but the reality for me came when I went up for a part, and the receptionist, I gave the receptionist my name, and she went like this. She went, "No." I said, "What do you mean, no? I haven't even read yet." She said, "It's all American." I said, "Yeah, I'm American." "No, no, no. All American. White. And I'm olive skinned." And then that year, I took the TV guide, I opened it up. You know, they always had a preview of the series that were coming up.
Sure.
I opened it up and I said, "I'm going to look for someone who looks like me." And there wasn't one. There were blacks, there were blondes, but there were no olive skins. So for every 100 parts, there would be, for a white guy, there'd be one part for me. And I said to my agent, "What am I banging my head up against the wall? I'm a rose, they're looking for orchids. I can be the best rose there is. I'm never going to be their orchid." And that's when my thoughts became, let's switch directions. Because Dreesen always said to me, you have to merchandise yourself, and you have to package yourself. So I had to repackage myself. He said, you have to reinvent yourself. So I reinvented myself. I was no longer going to be an actor. I was going to be a writer.
So let's talk more about that. That's that whole new avenue, whole new direction in life for you.
Well, this is a great story. This is a great story. My agent said, "All right, you want to be a writer? We'll send you up for a writing job." So he said, "You have an appointment 9:00 on Wednesday." I said, "Okay, fine. What's the show?" Just go on the show. Speak to Carl Kleinschmidt. Just, okay. I went. So I went, they said, "Bring a video." I brought a video of my television appearances, and Carl and Ronnie Graham were the writer and the two head writers. And they looked at my video and said, "You're very funny." I said, "Thanks." And we talked, and he said, "Would you like to be a writer on the show?" And I said, "Sure. What's the show?" And he said, "The Brady Bunch Variety Hour." And just as he said that, a little gnat flew in front of me, and I went like that to grab it. And he thought I was doing, like a Three Stooges take when he said and he said, "Yeah, you're definitely hired." And that's how I got the job.
A gnat got you the job.
A gnat got me the job. So, and then from that job, I went to another job because the head writer went to someplace else, and he took me with me, and then I did variety shows. I wrote variety shows, and then I wrote hidden camera shows, and then I wrote a special for ABC on Playboy, and that's a great story because it was 3 writers, And it was like a late night special for ABC, Playboy's Playmate Party. And so they take us up to the mansion. They give us an office with everything you could want, food, everything. They say, you're going to have a meeting with Hef at 12 o'clock. We have a meeting with Hef. He maps out the show the way he sees it, the way he wants it. We all check our notes. We go over with Hef our notes. He said, yep. And he said, we'll have a meeting at 9 o'clock tonight. So the three of us go back to the
mansion?
No, to the office.
Oh, okay.
The office in the mansion. And we write the show that we've just gotten the notes from. Boom, 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 boom. 9 o'clock, we have the meeting. Hef looks at it and he goes, you know what? My heart sank because I knew what was going to happen. I don't like this idea. Let's do this. And he pitches a whole new show. It's 9 o'clock at night. The trucks are coming at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Oh, wow.
So the three of us go back to the office and we now start writing a whole new show. By 4 o'clock in the morning, we got like one act done. And we were so punch drunk that I couldn't stop laughing. And Michael, who was one of the writers, was smoking pot nonstop. So he was stoned. The other guy was on the phone to his wife half the time. So nothing was getting done. The sun's coming up now. We don't have a script. The trucks are pulling in. The head writer says to me, go down and see what they're going to shoot first. So I run down to the set. What are you guys shooting now? The opening, and the director says, we don't have a script. Be right down. Run back to the office. This is what they're writing. Boom, boom, boom. We write it. I run down to the memo. I write it down, send it to the script girl. What's next? Okay, be right back. So that's how we wrote the show. We just kept running back and forth.
How'd it work out?
It was a piece of shit. There were no Emmy nominations for that.
For that one.
But it was worth it just for the experience.
So what are one or two of your greatest moments in show business? I haven't asked that question before, but I'd love to hear that from you.
All right. Here's my greatest moment, which starts off like the worst moment. And that is, I'm opening for Barry Manilow in Las Vegas. It's his premiere. Every journalist from all over the world, not the country, but the world is there. And it's and the marquee, it says, Barry, and roast beef, $3.50. I don't get filling. My opening joke was, the roast beef has got better filling than I did. So I had this piece in my act about natural childbirth, and I did one of the natural childbirth breathing exercises, which was just a loud scream. And I do the loud scream, and I hear somebody say, Steve, get a doctor. And I'm in my head, I'm going, oh God, not a heckler, not tonight, please. Steve, get a doctor. No, not tonight. Steve, look over here. And I look over and there's a woman having an epileptic fit. So I stop the show and I say, ladies and gentlemen, is there a doctor in the house? We need a doctor up front. The house lights come up. The front doors open up. The paramedics come in with the gurney. People are moving out of the way so they can get the gurney. And I'm going, is she okay? Is she all right? In my head, I'm going, why doesn't the bitch just die now? Dying, get this bitch out of here now. They put her back on the gurney. They take her out through the audience, up the stairs, out the front door. The doors close. The house lights come down. The spotlight comes up on me. And in my head, I'm going, holy fuck, what do I do now?
Now the comedy of Steve Bluestein.
Right. I looked out in the audience and I said, you know what? I don't think it's appropriate to do comedy right now. Why don't we take a few minute break and then we'll bring on Mr. Manilow. Polite applause, like I sunk a putt. So I get off stage and I literally start to cry because I think I have just blown it. Turns out the press thought it was the classiest thing that a comic could do. And Marilyn, I can't remember her last name. She's also dead now. Everybody's dead. I have to look in the mirror and make sure I'm still alive. Yeah. So Marilyn somebody was a big gossip columnist at the time. She was doing the Mike Douglas show in 2 days. She told them about what had happened. They flew me out to be on the show with her so we could talk about it.
Wow.
And she was, nothing but, it could have been a disaster. And this young man, that was my greatest moment.
Very nice. Very nice.
But that was the onstage greatest. The offstage greatest moment was opening for Donna Summer.
Ooh.
I did the first, and this is at the height of her disco fame.
Wow.
And at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. And after the first show, there's a knock on the door, and the door opened, and there's Donna Summer standing there.
Whoa.
And she comes in, she says, can I come in? I said, sure. She said, she takes my hand and she says, I just want to thank you for being part of our show.
Wow.
I went, oh,
wow.
It's my pleasure. She was from Roxbury.
Oh, okay.
I was from Chelsea, Mass.
I went to Northeastern.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I went to I was from Chelsea. I went to Emerson.
Oh.
I was from Chelsea, Mass. And we started giggling. There were 2 kids from Boston. Look where we are, And it was just, and then that whole week, they treated me like family.
Oh, wow.
That was the nicest moment off stage.
I didn't know Donna Summer was from Roxbury, Boston. That's just fantastic. I had no idea. No one was bigger than she was.
No. And let me tell you something else. Her last number was a big production number. And the curtain comes down, right? So there's a woman with a 7-year-old child on the ring, right on the ring, right on the stage. Donna's doing her number. I see, and I'm up in the back in the balcony looking down, and I see the woman pick the child up, put her on the stage, and push her toward Donna as the curtain is coming down. The kid is right in the line of the curtain.
Oof.
Donna, without missing a beat, calmly walks down, takes the little girl by the hand, pulls her back behind the curtain, all the time singing, all the time singing. And the curtain comes down. And I thought, that's amazing. Where do you learn that kind of control? Where do you learn that kind of, but she was a real professional.
A lot of good people in the business. A lot of good people.
A lot of shits too.
Yeah. Well, we're finding out about that as well.
I have to talk about my books.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Please. I'm so sorry. I was going to bring it up, but
my website is stevebluestein.biz, and there's a link on there with connection to all my books. My latest book is called Pint of Pines, and it's a story. It tells a story about, I had a really rough childhood, and we were homeless. It was bad. And there was this place called Point of Pine where the people were so kind and loving to me. They taught me what love is. And so I wrote a book basically to honor them.
wow.
And it's gotten 29 5-star reviews. It's only been out a couple of weeks. It's available on Amazon and iTunes. And for enough money, I'll come to the house and read it to you.
Yeah, that's great, man. And you've written a few books.
Yeah, I wrote Memoir of a Nobody, which is, I'm told, is the funniest book that people have ever read. And that has 98 5-star reviews. And then I wrote Take My Prostate, Please, which was chronicles my battle of prostate cancer. And then 49 and a Half Shades of Bluestein. That's a continuation of Memoir of a Nobody. And then Plain of Pines. And all the links are on my website.
Okay, say the website again.
Steve Bluestein, STEIN, Bluestein.biz/books. But you know, it's Stein, even though it's spelled STEIN. And people say, well, why isn't it Steen? I said, well, it's Bruce Springsteen, EEN, and it's Feinstein, not Feinstein. And I have a reel someplace. You know, I had in my house in Bel Air. I had an office, and we had a mudslide, and it took out the back of my house, the whole back of where my office was, and it destroyed every video, every photograph, every review under 6 feet of mud. It was like I said, it was like God was saying, "Get out of the business, and I'm going to help you by erasing everything." And I had a reel in there of talk show hosts mispronouncing my name. And you know, in Vegas, when you work, they record the announcement the week before you get there. So in Caesars, they mispronounced my name. And every night I would sit backstage, go la 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 la. I didn't want to hear it.
So, if you could change anything about your,
I changed my name.
About your stand-up experience, a different choice, a different direction. Have you thought about that? Would you have done anything differently?
Well, you know, I had an act like everybody else had an act. You know, you did the same stuff over and over and over and over and over again every night. And the trick is to make it sound like you're saying it for the first time. That's the trick. That's the acting exercise. And I was working someplace. I think it was at the Sands in Vegas. And in the middle of my act, I just stopped and I looked at the audience and I said, if I have to say this shit one more time, I'm gonna blow my head out. The audience laughed, and I said, "What do you do? You know, trying to, you know what I do. What do you do?" And I started talking to the audience, and my training from the Groundlings gave me a wealth of improvisational skills, and that's what happened. Was I would talk to the audience, they would have something. He would say he was a doctor. I would get the doctor chunk out. Next night, what do? You're an accountant? I'd get the accountant chunk out. So you could come and see me every night. It would be a different show. Unfortunately, for television, the buyers didn't understand that. They would say, well, you can't talk to the audience on television. And so that limited me. So I would guess I would have learned how to do it differently, but I enjoyed it. I mean, and it worked well. I mean, I got a lot of miles out of it.
Well, you've had a great career. You've worked the people that you've mentioned. You've worked with the biggest stars in the business. You've worked huge rooms. You've had good representation, well respected in the business, and on the whole scale of 1 to 10, boy, that's a 10. And I congratulate you.
Why do I feel like a 4? That's my problem. You know that thing. You know that song in a chorus line, dance 10, looks 1. That's me.
Well, and talking to the other guys and even myself, I could have done more. They say they could have done more. And
But you know the difference. I don't want to brag, but it's important to talk about this. I was in Vegas and I was working with another comic, and I saw him go to the roulette wheel, put down $5,000, which is what we were earning that week, $5,000, and lose it in 5 minutes. Just the whole 5,000 gone. And I looked at him and I said to myself, this will never happen to me. And from that day on, when I worked in Vegas, I walked through the casino like it didn't exist. And every time I earned money, I invested it. Every time, if I bought art, if I bought furniture, it was something that was an antique that would appreciate. I bought art. I bought stocks. I was always thinking about what I was going to do in the future after I retired, and so I'm okay.
God bless. Thank you.
I got friends that can't pay their rent. And
Yeah.
and that's why I try to do whatever I can raising money for. Right now, I'm raising money for Tales of Joy, which is Elaine Boozler's charity for animals. So my birthday is next week. Every year I raise money for Elaine, trying to give back, and if you're on Facebook, just go to my wall and there'll be a link and you can donate. All we're asking for is $5.
And at the end of this video, you'll see some information about Zoe Friedman's work that she's doing to help stand-up comedy and stand-up comedians.
Well, I think somebody at the Comedy Store started there's a fund for comedians,
right?
Because both Kerry Snow and Will Durst have had devastating strokes, and I've been raising money for them too. Well, Deb, Will's wife, started it. I've just been, pounding the pavement, telling people to donate.
That's great. That's great. Well, I'm glad I can get your voice out. I look forward to reading your books because you're a funny guy and you're a writer, a professional writer. So I really look forward to reading your books and letting you know as I finish them how terrific it was. So I appreciate you being on the show. And then again, this is the first show that I've done with someone I hadn't worked with, and I loved it. Thank you.
Do you want to hear a funny story?
Yeah.
I was flown to New York. Sam Bobrick wrote a play, and he wanted to take it to Broadway. He cast me in the lead. So the casting woman was Mary Goldberg, and she had come from L.A. She was a casting. So she said, "Gee, I just came from L.A. I'm surprised I didn't know you." And I said to her, "What do you do?" She said, "I'm a casting director." I said, "Well, of course, that's why you don't know me."
That's great. That's great. Steve, I really appreciate it. This was terrific, more than I could ask for. And listen, thanks, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Do you see this picture right here?
Yes.
That's Lassie. And it's,
really?
Yeah, and it's signed by Timmy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. John, I was, I grew up watching.
Absolutely.
I'll let you go.
All the best. Take care, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. See you again at the next 80s Golden Age of Comedy. Bye-bye, everybody.